I am not planning on moving back to the United States, the country of my birth, anytime soon, and potentially not ever. This is a really hard thing for me to admit, and I don't really know how I feel about it yet. This is maybe a bit heavier of a topic than I usually cover in a lot of my videos, so I'm sorry in advance if it turns out that this is a big bummer. The other day, my wife Elizabeth and I were talking about basically what we want to do in our future. And we do this a lot. We have talked quite a lot about what we want to do in our future, but we have noticed that it has begun to change recently in terms of where we envision ourselves 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, and so on. Normally, we've been considering a few different options. So obviously, we are currently living in the UK and we have been for about 4 years. And that means that very soon we will be up for indefinite leave to remain and eventually citizenship. And that is something that we definitely want to continue onwards with for the time being. The kids like it here, and it's basically just something where we figure, okay, we'll stay here for the time being until the kids are out of school, all grown up, and then we can kind of reassess and decide what we want to do after that. And that's always been under discussion. We've never really been 100% certain what we would like to do. Elizabeth would really like to move to Ireland. She is a lot more Irish than I am, and so for her, that is kind of a dream, being able to experience living in the place where our ancestors are from. I really miss living in Denmark, where we lived for about a year and a half before we moved here, but I admit that I am in the minority a little bit on that, and that's fine. We can have different opinions in this family. But always one of the things that has been under consideration in the past is, okay, maybe we'd move back to the United States. In the United States, we would typically be able to make a bit more money. We would typically be able to find somewhere to live that is probably a bit cheaper. And of course, we would also be closer to family and friends. We would certainly be able to find somewhere that is very cheap, somewhere where we could both visit our families pretty regularly. And that was something that was always under a strong consideration, especially if we ended up, say, finding exactly the right place or exactly the right house or whatever the case is. However, recently we asked ourselves the question again, would we ever like to move back to the States? And we were kind of, I wouldn't say surprised, but we were kind of a little bit shocked to realize that the answer was no. We aren't really considering the United States anymore. The reality is that the political climate of the US has been changing. I've never really gotten too political on this channel as of yet, but the reality is that we don't really feel safe considering moving back to the United States anymore. We initially moved to Europe in 2016 before the Trump election. It wasn't something where we were doing it because of political reasons. It was something where we just figured, okay, we'll move to Europe for maybe a few years. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. We'll get to see some new countries, see some new places, and then we'll probably end up moving back. So that was certainly not anywhere near the top of our minds in terms of our motivations for leaving the US in the first place. But then after Denmark, we moved here to the UK because we were starting to realize that we kind of prefer it a little bit over here. And of course, it's easier and more desirable for us to stay here because now we have accumulated possessions and other things like that that would be an absolute nightmare to ship back to the United States. We don't really feel safe bringing our kids back into the US school system, what with the just incredible amount of school shootings that are happening. One of them happened in a school not very far from where I grew up, and that kind of affects me very emotionally. We don't feel safe in a country where it seems that the Supreme Court is just really set on peeling back decades of human rights progression. We don't feel safe in the US with just basically almost nothing being done to halt the effects of climate change. The work culture in the US is also deeply unhealthy in comparison to what I've experienced over here in Europe. I find that the work culture is just way healthier in general and, a lot more sane. I would never really want to work full-time for a typical American company ever again. And this isn't to say that by any stretch of the imagination that I imagine that the UK is perfect or better. The reality is that basically any country that you live in is going to have its own flaws, its own drawbacks, its own terrible, terrifying things. There is no good place to live. You're always going to be experiencing some kind of drawback just based on the fact that all countries have their own flaws. I am also not going to go out of my way to demonize the US or exaggerate the reality that is on the ground. It is a wonderful place to live for many, many people and will probably continue to be so for a long time to come. we have just come to the realization that it is probably not the place that we personally believe that we would thrive in. The United States has taken a turn that we are pretty concerned about, and we simply want to stay away for the time being, hoping that it will improve. And this is really hard to admit. I don't really know how I feel about it, admitting that I don't feel like returning to live in the country where I was born, the country that raised me, the country where I learned everything that made me into the person that I am today. I don't know how I feel about the fact that I don't really see my family or my oldest friends very much anymore, simply because we are so far away that the reality of, regular visits is not very practical. And this is something that we have discussed a lot with each other. This is something that we have discussed a lot with the kids, and we are all kind of unified on this. The kids feel very much the same, and we have tried in many ways to kind of insulate them a little bit about the news that they see coming out of the United States. But at the same time, they are teenagers at this point. We can't really do very much to stop them. They're going to find out. It's just what's going to happen. And so we have had to have a lot of frank, honest, open discussions with them just about the way things are going. And that is something where they are on our side on this decision as well. It's also something that we have talked about with U.S. immigrant friends, basically other friends that we know here in the UK and elsewhere. They have echoed a lot of similar sentiments. I have talked to a friend who is a UK national who is living in the US, and they expressed regret that basically their career is tied up to the US in such a way that makes it very difficult for them to consider leaving or moving back to Europe. I am talking about it a lot with my therapist. It is a thing that I am working through. Again, I don't know how I feel about it. It feels bad, and it is very hard to process. I don't really know if there is any point or takeaway to this video in particular. I have been working through a bit of a dark phase recently, which is probably going to come out in this video. Well, obviously in this video, and probably the next few videos that I make as well, because I am working through a lot of heavy emotions that I have been feeling recently, and I feel like this is something that helps me to process it. This is something that helps me to get it out there, to have that discussion, to maybe connect with some other people who maybe feel the same way. I certainly do hope that this video at least resonates with somebody. So that is really it for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the end of this video. Thank you for sharing in, again, the dark side of my feelings. If you liked the video, who would? I don't know. Don't hesitate to smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and don't hesitate to comment down below. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this whole situation as well. Have a great week. I will talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.